Good evening, everyone. Wonderful to see you all, meet you all on the CCA Asia platform. CCA Asia is part of a global community called the Climate Coaching Alliance. And we are representatives from India, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Singapore, who have all joined together to form the CCA Asia. And our entire agenda is very clear that our conversations revolve around the planet, climate change. And today it's kind of become a mandate that we should ask the client and then get climate change in. But circumstances and the pandemic has made it very easy for us to bring this conversation as a very regular conversation as part of coaching, as part of client conversation, or anything else that we do. So it's nice seeing a lot of you who are not part of CCA Asia. And I see a few names. I'm sure your Abhay's links on LinkedIn who saw the poster and have joined in. Most welcome. This is a monthly meet that we have, and we have speakers every month talking about different topics related to climate change and sustainability. And if you're interested in taking up the global membership or Asia membership, it's nothing but your time that we ask for. There's no monetary exchange involved. It's just the second Friday of every month when we catch up. You can leave your email ID and we'll keep you posted. And whenever the topic sort of interests to you, you can definitely join in, or you can connect with us on our LinkedIn page. So I now hand it over to Jaya to formally introduce Abhay, and then Abhay can take over. Jaya?
Thank you. Thank you, Rashmi. Welcome, Abhay. It seems that the introduction you have given us is half, since we just came to know that you're a lawyer too. So, why not hear from you? What all do you do? We understand that you are an activist and community builder, ecosystemic practitioner, designer for transformation change, and you're doing a hell lot of work in the climate change field. And India is the conversation today. So, welcome. Thank you for taking out time for us and help us understand what all is happening in India landscape about climate change and what can we do from our level, what's possible. Because, most of the time this topic looks very unapproachable when we are sitting in our homes. So what can we do from our seats? Welcome, Abhay.
Thank you very much, Jaya and Rashmi. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm quite delighted that I get a chance to be a part of CCA's activities, especially at an early stage as some kind of criticality comes in at an India and an Asia level. I'm also quite honored and privileged to have a chance to share some part of my own journey and my own very emergent learnings. So let me fess up very early that I am a learner in the climate action space. I think it's so new and so complex and so layered that everyone is in some sense trying to make sense of this larger picture of what's happening to the world, what can I do about it, and what can I do as a leader or a coach or a facilitator so that others can do things about it, right? So I think that entire area is emergent, new, and full of both but also changes. So by way of a background, I describe myself as an educator, an activist, and a systems practitioner, and I co-founded a nonprofit based in Bangalore called the Initiative for Climate Action last year, and I have been teaching courses related to climate justice at both Azim Premji University and the National Law School in Bangalore for a few years now. And I've been an environmental activist and environmental law specialist for about 15 years. So my formal training is as a lawyer, though in reality, I jokingly almost say that I am an anti-lawyer because the activist in me actually sort of points out that the law is quite often being used for climate and environmental injustice. So my work is to really try and rescue the law from the clasps of the powerful and the extractive world, and bring it back in service of nature, if you wish. So my proposal for today, I mean, I accepted an invitation to share some thoughts, and I sort of provided a very large field of potential comments, right? Climate action leadership in India, and I'm going to, I think, really welcome questions and comments. I have an overwhelming slide deck in advance. I'm going to tell you that, and I'm going to share that with you, so you can spend a lot of time with it. And so if at some stage your emails might be dropped into the chat, that will allow us to just have some degree of continuity. But what I'd like to do before anything else is actually just invite everyone to introduce themselves briefly. We will close at 5, but I think we're a small enough group to get to know each other slightly. And my request would be, when you think of climate action leadership in India, what interests you? If you could just very briefly share what is interest or expectation from such a topic, that would be delightful. So I could go first, and I've already introduced myself. And I think as regards the topic, my sense is it's really not a technical solution or a scientific solution that is going to take us away from the cusp of climate emergency and move us to a regenerative, balanced way of living with nature. I think it is a change in mindsets, a change in consciousness, and really a change in how we show up in our day-to-day context as leaders who are leading from a future. For me, in some sense, more important than the carbon statistics, more important than the sort of very controversial north-south, center-periphery climate political debates would be this idea of a climate consciousness, right? And so climate leadership is, for me, at the center of all solutions when it comes to the climate crisis. If my internet acts up, because I just got a signal that says my internet connection is unstable, maybe Rashmi or Jaya, you could let me know, and I can just, for the moment, at least turn off my video so that y'all can at least hear me well. So yeah, maybe first Rashmi, then Jaya, then others in the room. A very quick introduction and what interests you in the topic, just so we have a sense of who's in the room and where interests lie. Over to you, Rashmi.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Rashmi Shetty, and I'm by profession a voice and attitudinal coach, but by passion, nature and climate became part of my everyday agenda as a mother and as a citizen, because I thought, coming from the beautiful city of Bangalore, nature has been murdered in the name of progress. And that was something that hurt me. And that's how I was a silent activist. Now I've joined groups which have similar thought processes. But as far as leadership is concerned, I feel nothing is being done. So your topic really intrigued me, Abhay, when you offered to speak on this. And I was just wondering, what can you bring in? And now that you gave us the stamp of being a lawyer, we know from where you're going to speak. And the anti-lawyer, well, we'll find out at the end of it, we'll tell you where we see you. So that's where I'm in here.
Thank you. Beautiful. So would you like to share?
Hey, so I'm Jaya. I've been working in coaching industry for almost 10 years. It comes from a very normal background about learning things and changing things. And the reason I got interested in this coaching alliance is I realized that we can't talk in silos, and climate is part of the system that we are part of. We, while we are doing coaching work, it's just doesn't make sense to apply the coaching process and just go on with that. So the climate piece basically gives you more perspective about how do you think perspective, holistically. And I've been part of initiatives in my own community about garbage segregations and decompositions and how things like that. And it just kind of creates a sense of responsibility to say, hey, at least start getting to activist even if you're not an activist. So that's where I am.
Thank you, Jaya. I'm just going to actually, normally I would ask people to pass it around, but I'll just steer the introductions. So Akriti, would you like to quickly check in on maybe introduce yourself and your interest in this topic of climate action leadership?
Yeah, so I'm Akriti Srivastav, and I work as an urban planner in Delhi. And I personally attend like a lot of cleaning drives and plantation drives here in Delhi, but it's my master's and thesis from which I began to develop interest in climate action and climate change. And so, yeah, that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Welcome. Naksha, would you like to briefly introduce yourself and your interest in climate action leadership?
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I have the video off because I'm not in India, and the time zone where I am doesn't permit me to turn it on. So I am an urban designer, and I've worked for climate change or climate action in a very indirect way through looking at sustainable development goals in the urban design projects that I'm a part of, and so on. So what actually drew me to this conversation was because the sort of trend I see is for climate action is like, one, there is a lot of effort being done at the policy level, at the finance level, where it's completely top down. And on the other hand, a lot of activists and initiatives doing ground up. And I almost see there's a huge gap in the middle. And my profession of urban design and so on is really that in between. And I was really hoping to discover how could the role of urban design and so on play a role in leadership in climate action. And I look forward to discussing with all of you. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you. Ritu, would you like to briefly introduce yourself and your interest in climate action leadership?
Certainly, Abhayraj. Firstly, I must congratulate you for leading this arena of climate change leadership and being the activist and taking the message forward. And that's why we are here today, to listen to you and to get further motivated in what we do. So Abhayraj, I am a founder of a venture by the name Shakhsiyat, which is skills for significance, and it's also into lead for from within coaching. So we also look into personality development. So the kind of clientele that we have is, from the young generation to say millennials. And I'm so happy about being associated with the whole thing about climate change and climate action, because I feel that the people that my venture works with and works for, we are looking into building holistic personalities who in turn will not just lead themselves, but also bring a change around them, wherever they are. So it feels really good to take that message across, and I'm happy to share that I'm getting that kind of clientele. They are the ones who are attracted to our venture, are the ones who are actually looking at holistic development. And that is one thing. And the other thing is that having had a background of master's in geography way back in the 90s, somewhere I have always tried my best to bridge the gap between the grassroots level and the metropolitan culture. So at a very small scale, I've done things from whatever capacity I could. However, I see that there is a huge scope going forward, and I wish to continue filling or bridging this gap. So that's a little bit about me and my venture. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Lots of interesting words and lots of interesting inquiries there. So very good to hear you introduce your interests and yourself. Welcome. Vedita, hi. Lovely to see you. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself and your interest in this topic?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Abhay. I'm Vedita, and I actually work with Abhay at the Initiative for Climate Action. And I'm actually interested in this topic because I aspire to be a climate action leader. I currently, like I mentioned, I work with Abhay at the ICA, and I'm also working on building a community on the side of working professionals interested in the climate action space, and also working on a startup which is kind of addressing the same problem as Naksha kind of pointed out, the gap between top-down and bottom-up initiatives in the climate action space. So I think just learning about climate action leadership and being with you all will give me a lot of perspective. And also at the ICA, one of our main goals is also to help develop further climate action leaders. And hopefully by hearing Abhay today, in this context, I could deliver on that as well there, or learn more for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vedita. Lovely to have you with us. Hi, Anushri, would you like to go next?
Yes, I'll tell you where I am right now. Right now, I am knowing and being that I am nature. Okay, I've lived a life thinking that nature is something different from me. And since I was introduced to CCA, it has helped me to realize and connect myself much more closely to nature. Now, I'm just trying to take care of nature through this CCA platform. And all my work revolves around whatever that's the highest good for the human beings. So the different modes that I use for that is coaching, mentoring, therapy. So that's what I'm seeking for, working on without separating nature.
Thank you. Delighted to have you with us. And I think we can all learn a lot from where you are right now. So nice to hear that. Hi, Alak, would you like to briefly introduce yourself and your interest in this topic?
Hi, I am a lawyer by profession. I used to work exclusively with the oil and gas sector. Like I was a corporate lawyer working in that sector. And then I went for my master's. I did my master's in environmental and energy laws from Georgetown, focusing very specifically on climate change adaptation policy. And now I'm back and I'm just trying to figure my place in this space, basically, trying to figure out how to move forward with what I want to achieve, and how to put my thoughts into the sector and how to make it effective, basically, rather than just have so while I was focusing primarily on doing research work, now I feel like it's kind of like it doesn't really get implemented, right? Like there's a lot of stopgap between research that has happened, what we know about the problems and issues and how they are implemented. So I'm basically trying to find my space. That's the situation at this point.
Thank you. Welcome. And you've seen both worlds. So I think you'll have a lot to offer other learners as well. And it's great to know that you've made that transition from oil and gas and a corporate law to hopefully climate action, climate justice. That's beautiful. Thank you for being here. Veena, hi. Would you like to introduce yourself and your interest in the topic of today's focus?
Yeah, sure. My apologies, I was a bit late, so I've missed most of the introductions, but hope I'll catch up in some way. So I am an ICF accredited coach. And I've been associated with coaching, Climate Coaching Alliance. So I'm just a member, and I happen to, see some of their presentations. I want to be in this space because I genuinely feel we need to do something about climate change. And I don't know ways and means wherein I want to do something which will bring this in the forefront. Like, it seems to be at the back of the mind for all of us. But what is it that we are actively doing, like in whatever small way that we can? So I'm trying to figure out ways and means by bringing this up in conversations and seeing what people feel about it. So yeah, this is my attempt towards this, but I'm looking to learn more.
Thank you. Very welcome. And I think we're all in that space of looking to learn and trying to find our space in a world that is changing. Last but not the least, Abdullah, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself and your interest in this topic? Hi, Abdullah, are you able to unmute and speak? Okay, so maybe Abdullah is not able to speak. I wanted to just go around the room to get a sense of who's here. And I think it was nice to learn who is in the room. I'll get started. And my proposition would be that I'll speak for about 15 minutes, and we could use the last 15 to 20 minutes for questions or comments. My time management is not the best in the world, so I will, and I am a loquacious teacher, so I can speak and speak and speak. So at some stage, when we are dangerously close to 5, someone should interrupt and say time up, because otherwise I'll finish up all the time and we won't have a chance for any quick reflections at the end. I think for me, what I'm sort of demonstrating through my process is part of my message. I think our collective intelligence actually offers us most of the answers. Right? I think given who we are, given our experiences, and given our ability to just meet each other in the right way and have spaces where we can show up with our vulnerabilities, with our uncertainties, with our desires, with our experiences, that itself for me is an important part of the terrain of what climate leaders do engage with and should see as an opportunity, right? And therefore, it was important for me not just to have that as a formulaic introduction, but I think that's now part of the collective intelligence in the room, what people are doing, what their journey has been like, and what they're looking for in this topic. So once again, I'll request you to please drop your emails into the chat box in case you would like to receive a copy of the deck, because there's a lot of content in the PPT that I'll be sharing today, and I won't be covering all of it in detail, but maybe you could access it at your leisure, or you could always send me an email. My email is my first name and my last name at gmail.com, and I'll be happy to share the deck with you, right? So can someone confirm that my screen is visible?
It is, it is.
Super, right? So I'm speaking about climate action leadership in India, and my approach to this is to really, through a series of frames, give you a sense of what is climate action, what is the space of climate action, both globally and in India. How have some people spoken about or conceptualized this paradigm of climate action leadership that might be required, and where might we find opportunities to contribute to a changing world through climate action leadership, right? So I'm trying to surface some emergent responses to all of these questions, and I'll do so both through my own research into the area and some part of my journey as a practitioner, just so you know how others are evolving their journey to incorporate a climate sensibility into their work, right? So in one sense, a large part of leadership or a large part of even climate action is inspired by where do you want to go to through your exercise of leadership or through an application of your action, right? And my first submission is rather than the doom and gloom, rather than the apocalypse and destruction, rather than the warming, the heat waves, the floods, an important thing for you to do for yourself and for interlocutors, clients, collaborators is to have this vision of what kind of world might result if we are all climate leaders today. What are we actually fighting for? Can we move away from a crisis mode of coping and really think with an expansive, transformative mode of what if, right? What might indeed be possible. And so for me, this imaginary of climate heaven, right, is very useful. I always ask myself, what am I doing today that can one day allow my city to be like this, right? Where in the foreground, there's a kingfisher, and then there are these two deer looking at me. And in the background, I can see a city that has people cycling, people sitting in the park, has windmills, has an eagle, has some kind of modular living that very much has green integrated into it, right? And this is an artist who sort of visualizes futures, and I got this these two images from the founder of the transition movement, Rob Hawkins' very powerful talk, From What Is to What If, which is also the title of his excellent book, right? So here's another image. If our cities were food gardens, what if children walk to school? What if I could actually, on my walk to my workplace or school, reach out and find myself something tasty to eat from a tree, right? And inspired by this, even in my own garden, which abuts a busy road in the cantonment area of Bangalore, in Coxtown in Bangalore, I've now come up with a new plan to actually build to grow fruit-bearing trees on the of the garden. And I'm actually happy when people take fruit from trees and plants that are growing in my property, right? So it's moving from a mindset of scarcity and enclosure to a mindset of abundance, which for me represents climate heaven, right? So I'm just giving you what really sits well with me. And having spoken about that at a very broad level, what am I looking for? What am I doing my work for? What might be the positive side of the climate story? My first theoretical submission is that for climate action leadership to actually change the world, you have to distinguish transformative change from incremental or reformative change, right? So no matter who you're working with members of your family, you're working with children, you're working with a business client as a business coach, you're working as a consultant with a decision maker in a city, right? There's always the possibility of locating yourself in terms of, yeah, I can improve performance, right? Or I can understand your system, and where there is something wrong, I can come up with something new. Or I can be with you on a journey of innovating and creating previously unimagined possibilities, right? And this is not to say that incremental or reformative is bad. In fact, those are very, very important as well. But please be aware that when you're talking transformative, you're actually in the space of being a vision creator, an experimenter, an inventor, right? So you're open to failure because failure actually offers the best learning, right? And you're no longer asking questions of what structures and processes do we need, which actually is the bread and butter of many strategic consultants and arguably a high percentage of coaches as well, right? Let me work with performance, let me improve performance. But you're holding space for questions such as, how do I make sense of this? What is the purpose of my work, of my company, of my city, of my nation, right? How do we even know what is best, right? So it's the big questions that inevitably will open up new ways of thinking about power, right? Power between boss figures and employee figures, power between adult people and children, power between men and women, power between human and the non-human, power between savvy, tech-oriented and not so savvy, old school, right? And that is the space in which I think a new breed of climate action leaders have to learn how to operate, right? Asking these questions, holding these questions, and seeing very clearly that my job here is to vision, to experiment, and to invent with you, right? If you're a coach, you're doing that with your client. So one of the core competences or capabilities for climate action leadership would be to see the system, right? Because the nature of climate change in its complexity is one that no longer will be satisfied with a reductionist or part-based approach, right? And I really liked when we had holistic personalities, right? That's similar to a systemic approach where you're seeing the whole, you're seeing the interrelationships, you're seeing the full elephant instead of seeing just the tusks or the legs of the elephant or the flapping ears. You have the full picture, right? And for climate action leadership, a great body of knowledge developed over 6 decades now on systems thinking, systems change, systems theory, what the brilliant leadership guru Peter Senge called the fifth discipline, right? In his seminal work by the same name, is for me one of the most important competences, right? Just seeing how there are feedback loops, how this affects this, affects this, affects this, right? Even if you think of the technical world of climate change, the atmosphere is like a bathtub with all of our actions being taps that are slowly pouring carbon into the atmosphere. Right? And as the bathtub gets full and water begins to drip over into the bathroom floor, that is the equivalent of the carrying capacity of the atmosphere. The atmosphere's capacity to carry carbon being absorbed and all kinds of climate impacts that are not desirable resulting, right? So how do you slow down the taps? How do you open some sinkholes that will allow water to drain, right? That is starting to think in a system, seeing the connections, seeing the loops, seeing the reinforcing loops, right? Seeing the balancing loops and seeing where are the places to actually intervene. So again, I'm just being a bit biased towards the perspective of a coach, given the host of this conversation. If you are working with a leader as a coach, and that leader is really looking to take his or her organization to a new paradigm, you would do well to, with that leader, look for where is the leverage point in the system. Where can I, with a little bit of effort, big change? Because that is a massive opportunity, right? Another way of thinking about it for urban planner and urban designer friends, where in the city can I poke a needle as an urban acupuncturist, right? To free up blocked energy in the city, right? What the mayor of Curitiba popularized, where he just walked around the city, he saw that, oh, here I should have a bus stand, there I should have a park, and that will really bring alive the city. It'll make the city more resilient when there's extreme rainfall, right? So thinking systemically for me is the heart and soul of the competences involved with climate action leadership, right? And Donella Meadows' work is really worth getting into, right? She's the grandmother of systems thinking, if you wish, and she's really identified a list of 12 places to intervene in the system, right? And we spend so much time talking about numbers, about parameters, even about delays, but the real most powerful place to intervene in the system, what's number one, would be at the level of the goals of the system itself, right? Or the mindset, or the ability to transcend paradigms. And so, again, coming back to the perspective of a coach, right? If you're the CEO of a company such as Interface, right, a famous manufacturer of carpets, and one day someone comes and asks you, hey, you're such a successful company, what do you see as your legacy to the world? Right? And then at that moment tells you also about what's going on in terms of destruction of forests, etc., etc. Maybe as a CEO, and this is what happened with Interface, right? Interface CEO had a moment, an epiphany, where he realized that he really was not interested. The goal of him starting a company was not to make so much money. The goal of him starting a company was to leave a lasting legacy. And he realized at that moment that Interface could perhaps be the most sustainable company in the world. Right? So Interface organizes its factories as forests. Each factory beautifully organized like a forest. It's actually it's carbon negative. So in terms of their supply chains, they're actually taking away carbon rather than putting carbon into the atmosphere, right? And slowly you're seeing Google's or even Infosys in India beginning to make similar commitments, right? But the true leaders, Interface, or even the travel and adventure and sustainability goods company Patagonia, they realized quite early on that at the level of paradigms or at the level of goals of the company itself, the CEO's goal changed from I want to make so much money, I want to sell so many goods, I want to have presence in so many cities, to a question of my legacy or my company's legacy or my company's relationship to the world around us, right? So really, I would invite you in your own work to think of how are you engaging with leverage, whatever the work it is. If you have a client or not, if you're a researcher, thinker, even just as a conversationalist, as an activist, as someone who's doing something small in your own context, how through what you're doing are you actually engaging with the mindset that controls the business as usual system? How are you beginning to trouble the untroublable goals of the system, which seem to be so powerful that nothing can change them, right? But as the fable tells us, it just takes a small child to say, hey, the emperor is naked, for everybody to start laughing and realize that the emperor is indeed naked. So I'm very firmly in the camp of Margaret Mead, who said, never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. That is, in fact, the only thing that has. Right. And so I think as long as you understand your leverage, right, and understand where there is most power to change the system, these small actions can make all the world of a difference. Right. So getting slightly more specific into the technical content of climate action, across the world, cities become very, very important for climate action work, not least because cities are the major contributor of carbon into the atmosphere. right? So in India, believe it or not, close to 90% of emissions are coming from urban locations, right? And that figure uh, is contested, but cities are really the huge generators of carbon into the atmosphere from a emissions perspective. And for those of you all who need this, why is carbon so important? Basically, what are called greenhouse gases, right? Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, even certain innocuous gases like water vapor, ozone, to collectively called greenhouse gases, of which carbon in carbon dioxide and methane is the biggest player. When they are in the atmosphere, the sun's rays come in, the sun's rays can't go out because of these gases in the atmosphere. So they work like a greenhouse, right? And and therefore carbon becomes quite often central to talking about climate change. If we can reduce the carbon in the atmosphere, more of the sun's rays will go out. It'll come in and it'll go out. Right now it comes in, it gets out because the concentration of greenhouse gases of carbon has gone over 400 for the first time in 10,000 years, right? So if we reduce this carbon content, more of the gases will go out, right? So a lot of carbon and climate change talk is about how to reduce emissions going into the atmosphere, what is commonly referred to as mitigation. And for whatever company, clientele, even in the context of your own house, when you are reducing your carbon dependency, when you are walking instead of taking your car, when you are composting instead of putting unsegregated waste into the dustbin, when you are growing plants on your terrace, right? You are contributing to mitigation efforts because you're effectively taking carbon away. That bathtub that's filling up, you're helping it actually come down so it doesn't overflow, right? So mitigation is one big focus of climate action leadership. Adaptation is the other big focus, right? What is adaptation? Adaptation basically is whatever we do, some climate impacts are unavoidable, right? For example, for those of you all in Bombay, how much it rained yesterday it's not been raining like that in one day for many years, right? So people have to deal with that rain. People have to respond to that. Some people have to go to school, some people have to grow crops, some people have to sell products in a shop, right? Life as usual has to deal with impacts of climate change that are unavoidable, right? And increasing the capacity of people, of businesses, of companies, of farmers, of communities, of cities to deal with the impact of climate change is called adaptation. So if I, for example, on my house put solar panels so that when a storm hits my city and I'm knocked off the grid, my house still has power, I'm engaging in an adaptation activity. When I'm changing my seed from this variety, which needs a lot of water and will grow only when it's cool, so I start growing a new variety, which needs very little water, and even if it gets very hot, will still grow. That is an adaptation action, right? And so between them, mitigation and adaptation, the world of climate action is constituted. You're either mitigating or you're adapting. And lest you have that question, basically we need to do both. It's not an either or. We need to mitigate and we need to adapt to effectively respond to the climate crisis, right? So coming back to my point on cities, in cities, these are the 4 hot areas, right? This is the core of carbon mitigation in cities. If you're working with entrepreneurs who are interested in starting new climate action ventures, and they have a technical or technological side to them, they would do well to start thinking of how can I decarbonize my city's reliance on coal, right? For those of you who live in India, at least, I can guarantee you that the electricity that's powering your house is coming from a thermal plant that is running on coal, which is contributing carbon, right? How do you move your house's electricity to solar, to wind power, to a renewable source? that means your entire city's energy grid should be decarbonized in some sense, right? Optimizing energy efficiency in buildings, just making buildings more energy efficient, right? Mobility is super hot. Just making sure that people are not wasting petrol and diesel, burning it sensibly, having to travel long distances, right? So that's why shared mobility, even these electric vehicles, scooters, walkable cities, all of that is really going to make a big difference. And of course, waste management. Waste for me is waste and food are an entry into everything else. So I, for a long time, felt very guilty of how I used to order from Zomato and Swiggy and then be a climate activist. And then finally, I realized that fixing my waste management and fixing my food take me to every other part of the cycle, right? Because once you go, it's circular in that sense, right? What grows eventually dies, and then that leads to new things growing. And this is the circle of waste and food, or the circle of life and death. And really being in balance with that is one way, the most effective way to respond to the climate crisis.
So it is 4:51, so that's 9 more minutes. Okay, you're awesome. I'm really sorry I didn't want to interrupt, but I thought I'd just give you a heads up on time.
No, thank you. I appreciate that because I needed that. Otherwise, I would have used all our remaining time. So I'm just going to end with a set of concluding comments. I'll take 2 or 3 minutes more. The drawdown report has a list of the 100 top climate solutions. And for those of you all who are interested in understanding the technology, it would be useful to just know what are these top 100 climate solutions that can actually bring us to drawdown, where carbon will actually come down enough to keep the world in a safe place, right? And it's freely accessible on the internet, the drawdown report, right? I'm not going to get into this in detail, but if you want to understand climate action, you need to move through energy, through transport, through the built form, through farming, through forests, to actually paradigms of growth, to population, right? To new and emerging technologies, which can actually suck out carbon from the atmosphere or produce energy in ways that we didn't know possible, right? And this is the brilliant En-ROADS Climate Interactive Panel, which is again freely accessible, a tool that you can use in a workshop as well. It doesn't take long to master, and it really is the world's best science in a nicely packaged form, which anyone can pick up. Again, some examples of all the moving parts here: buildings, food, green infrastructure, transport, waste, right? And pathways of change. You could work with policy, you could work with business, you could work with integrative scenarios, you could work with behavior change, you could work with technology and design innovation, right? And my submission is that the most impactful leader is one who's again seeing the whole. So reducing yourself and saying, I'll do this, I'll only fix finance, might be good. And sometimes we need that. But for the whole system to change, having visibility on all the parts would be really useful, right? So is there a new paradigm of leadership to bring together what I've been feeling, reading about, and thinking of in response to the climate crisis? Yes, regenerative leadership is how I think of it. And there is thankfully a good body of work on this topic, which I think is the best tool of the climate coach or the climate leader, right? What is regenerative leadership? I'm not going to get into it in detail. This book by Giles Hutchins and Laura Storm is highly recommended. It also has a great set of tools for the practitioner. In essence, regenerative, so this is Giles Hutchins and Laura Storm, right? In essence, how do you organize your consultancy, your coaching, your research? Basically, how do you organize your work, your action in a way that you are life-affirming, in a way that you actually recognize that an apple that falls from the tree is not a rotten apple that is bad, but it is food for the worms and it's the next generation of life. Okay? And once you begin to see that way, you see everywhere around you, there's a way you can either be life affirming or you can be life reducing. Right? So how do you bring in into your company, into your client, into your work, but most importantly, into yourself, a life affirming energy? How, like the ants and the bees and the birds, can you always be fluid, changing, responsive, right? And mindfulness practitioners will note it's more about presence rather than preparation. Rather than focusing on superstars and individuals, how can you really amplify the relational and the collaborative dynamics at play in your workspace? How can you not run away from diversity, right? Where the water meets the land, at the edge of the forest and the village is where life thrives, where hot water and cold water meet, right? So how can you, in your work, recognize that principle from nature and bring it into our organizational context? Or even recognize your own blind spots, where you shy away from someone who thinks differently and you think that's not good. How can you be cyclical and rhythmical, right? Instead of our 24/7 bright lights, maximum performance, how can you recognize that everything needs a period of rest during winter time, during dark times, right? And then there'll be a period of growth, of high intensity during spring and summer. And how can you in your company, in your own work, bring it in your own day, bring in these cycles? And finally, how can you actually no longer see anything as waste, no longer see anything as useless? Everything is flowing in and flowing out, right? Everything could be, in that sense, circular or regenerative. So I end with that, right? Remember that we have most of our human history actually been in tune with nature's living systems, right? It's only in a very recent past that we're moving towards extreme climate breakdown, what is called the sixth mass extinction. Right now, stress is at its highest. Right? Everywhere people are stressed out beyond belief. And as the regenerators point out, the stress is because of stressed systems and a stressed planet, right? So once you see the connections, you really have an in even to the boss who's interested in performance, right? Stress actually costs money. It impedes performance. And even your most money-minded person will see the argument when presented as part of a larger frame. So I'm going to end there. There's a lot more here. Cotter's accelerator model as applied to climate change. This is an initiative from the Forum for the Future, which is mapping out the climate action sector in India right now. It's very, very hot and emerging work, right? Lots of problems in the sector, hero activists, devalued collaboration, very responsive rather than shaping our climate action narratives, right? Depleted capacity, information flows are hampered. It's not final yet, but hopefully it will be final in a few more months. Yeah, I'm going to not get into this. This is the donut economics model, which is a solid economics model that is the basis for a regenerative world, right? It's really working with what you see on the outside as planetary boundaries and what you see as the inside as the minimum social indicator. So the green, the donut, is the safe and just space for humanity, right? And it's the role of climate action leaders to help us see the donut wherever we are, in our own homes, in our own cities, in our own companies. And Kate Raworth's videos are very, very accessible, again, available on the internet. Right? So this is the ICA. We're trying to, the Initiative for Climate Action, we're trying to build our own Section 8 nonprofit company on this kind of logic, where we have an a system where we manage ourselves. We want to have an egalitarian compensation philosophy. We really walk the talk, trying to be okay with being different. And they're really trying to operate at the level of changing paradigms, constantly learning rather than having very fixed projects. So that's it from us. I'll end with just these quotes, right? You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Buckminster Fuller. Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. Right? And Donella Meadows, one of my favorite people, start with a vision, be open to any path by which the vision will be realized, be patient and persistent, be true to the vision, and things will work out, right? Somewhere else she said, just go into the rabbit hole and see how deep it goes. You can't figure out in advance how to be the best climate action leader. The whole point is actually being very, very present and mindful. So that's it. I've used up all the time like I warned you, though I think Rashmi did step in and tell me